Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And just a reminder, my home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can always find good things like our psychic and medium classes, get to know the power of your soul. Also, we have a free Sunday gathering. It's an inspirational service with medium demonstration included on Zoom, happens every Sunday, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Got lots going on, but it's all at wedon'tdie.com. Now, onto our episode today. One of the top reasons that I personally believe in the afterlife is the hundreds and hundreds of stories that I've heard and that I've read about something called deathbed visions, visitors that come those final moments before we depart. They look young and healthy, look just as real as other people in the room that are alive, and let people know that they'll be going on a trip. So no one dies alone. Our guest today had told me some of those stories when I met her many years ago at a medium workshop. Incredible time. I met this beautiful lady, and since then, she has written her own book. Let me tell you a little bit about her. First of all, the name of her book is Healing Whispers from Spirit Guides, Bridging the Gap Between Life and the Afterlife with a Death Doula's Wisdom. So that's right, a death doula. She's been working with people, with hospice, with a group called No One Dies Alone. It's been a long time since we've caught up. I'm thrilled that she's put it all together in this book with so much more. So we'll find out about her today. So I'd like to say, Helen Gretchen Jones, welcome, my friend, to We Don't Die.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I'm so happy to be here.
I just want to give you a big hug through the screen. It's been so too long, but you've done so much. First of all, if you wouldn't mind telling us all about you, there's so much about your past and who you are and where you are, and then we can get into stories and things. But let us know a little bit about you.
Well, I am in Central Texas and I am married with a couple of kids. Very suburban sort of socially norm situation going on there, but I do death doula work, which is a little outside of social norms. Death doula, a death doula is someone who holistically helps someone transition to the other side. I think it's a growing need with the changing shifts in our healthcare system. A lot of times nurses used to be able to have the time to sit bedside, and now they have so much red tape and paperwork. It's very helpful now to have someone else that can come in and sit beside people who are transitioning. And I think that's where the death doula can come in and really help there. And so it's one of my favorite things that I get to do. And I am just so honored to be able to sit bedside with some of these patients.
How did you first get involved in that? Because it's not the average person that says, gee, I'd like to do this.
Well, I've always had a connection with spirit my whole life. So that has always been a natural part of my own perspective of the world. But in 2015, my father transitioned, and it was unexpected for a lot of people in my family. And he had cirrhosis of the liver, and he was only in his 50s. So it sort of took the family by surprise, not me so much, but the rest of the family. And there was a lot of just it, there wasn't closure. And a lot of people had a lot of unsaid things, especially my sisters, around his death. And it just made me think, wow, if there was a way that I could sit with families and help them find closure, find peace before their loved one transitions so that other families don't have to experience what my family did, or if there was a way to help people to transition so they don't feel that fear around death, that would also be something I would like to be a part of. And through a series of serendipitous events, I came across certification as a death doula, and I just dove right in, and I haven't looked back since.
Those first days must have been tough. We have that feeling that we want to do something. And I know there's a lot of joy within hospice, but you also get to know people and then they depart. How was it for you when you first got involved?
So with hospice, that's where it is the hardest because you do form those relationships with loved ones. They become your family. Sometimes I've had patients last as long as 5 years on hospice. I also volunteer with NODA, which is a No One Dies Alone program. And in that situation, you only know these people for 1 to 3 days typically. So it's a much shorter time. But at first, I thought I really needed to be the strong one. I needed to not cry. I needed to have the answers. I needed to have it all together whenever I sat with these people and their families. But that really takes a toll on you, because it is an emotional situation that you're sitting in. Once I allowed myself to be free to experience exactly what I was experiencing in the moment, and I do tear up with every one of my patients, it made the not only the patient, but the family feels safe to be vulnerable also. They all break down and then they say what they need to say. They find that strength within themselves to say those final words that maybe they're holding up because they don't want to appear weak or as a burden often. And so they hold it all in. But if one person breaks down, then everybody else starts to, and it's the most beautiful thing to unfold. So I no longer apply that resistance trying to be the strong one. I allow what is to just happen. And it's amazing how everyone seems to open up.
Yeah, you just show you're human and it's okay. I don't know when it happened. I think probably around the time, they say that funerals used to happen in the home, and then they moved funeral parlor outside of the home to a place. And so death wasn't seen as much as it was years and years ago. And now it's so hidden. And I
Mhm.
think just as being human, it's like it's hard to believe it's ever going to happen to any of us. So when it does come, there's that whole question, and there's fear, and then there's, of course, sorrow, and there could be guilt and grief and all that tied together. To have someone to be there is a beautiful thing. We have midwives bringing babies in, we have the death doulas helping us go back home, right?
That's right. That's right. And it's also important to note that the fear that around death is often just after and before we are diagnosed with a terminal illness. The fear seems to go away in that final week. There seems to be a shift as that person moves into two worlds at once. They start to see things and they start to have moments of peace and moments of, hey, maybe it's not so scary after all. And it's the family who hangs on to this fear around death while the other person is moving into accepting it and recognizing loved ones at the bedside. So the fear is what we put on ourselves before death and when we first receive a terminal illness. But when we actually start the process of transitioning, that fear releases and it really is beautiful.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Oh, have you heard some of those stories yourself, or are there stories you can share with us? Because I know I often recommend Dr. Christopher Kerr's book, Death is But a Dream, who studied over 1,700 people as a hospice doctor and told these beautiful stories, even created a film about him and how real people are. And it's like they're taking us home. Have you yourself been bit by the bedside and witnessed some of these times?
Almost every single time. Almost every single time. So I have witnessed people standing outside their bodies, other beings of light, angelics, other family members. I've actually had shared death experiences where I go partway into the spirit world with some of my clients and patients. So I'm a believer, but I'm absolutely open to it, which is I think why some of these experiences are happening so frequently for me. It's actually maybe too why I'm a death doula because there's such a moment of joy that I get to experience at the bedside. So it doesn't fill me with all this sadness the way maybe some other people might perceive it. It's glorious. So I would say one story that I'm really enjoying sharing right now is a story about Mrs. Wilma. And Mrs. Wilma was on the NODA program. So when that happens, you get when you're when you volunteer with NODA, they send out an email, just like an email blast to everybody, and you fill up a time slot in 3-hour time shifts. And I signed up. I went down to the hospital and sat with Mrs. Wilma. And on my way there, I knew that I was going to be visiting an elderly woman, and I knew that she would be. Um, I knew that she had family, but that her family wouldn't be able to make it in. And when I got there, I knew that was validated. And I think the reason spirit gives me that information, they give me oftentimes a age or a race or a gender, is just so that when I arrive and it's validated, I know that I'm tuned into spirit. So I think that's why they give it to me. So I knew when I showed up, there she was. It was validated. And I sit down. She looks so peaceful already. And I start my own little ritual of like prayer and intention. And I place my hands on her hand. And out of the corner of my eye, I see a little girl walk in. And I was like, oh. And then it occurred to me she was in black and white. When I see spirit in black and white, it gives me a time frame of 1920s to 1969, respectively. And I think that's because of photography being black and white during that time. That's just my own like hang up around that. So here she comes in black and white, and it's a younger version of Mrs. Wilma. She's probably 12 or 13 years old. She's wearing her Sunday best. She's, got her hair twisted in little pigtails. And she walks over to me and takes my right hand. My left hand is holding elderly Mrs. Wilma's hand. When this happens, the entire hospital room transforms into this forest. So I am aware that I am in two worlds at once. I am very much aware that I am observing elderly Mrs. Wilma in the hospital room. I'm aware of the navy blue chair that I am sitting in. And then I'm simultaneously aware of standing in this forest holding young Mrs. Wilma's hand. And I had this amazing feeling that I was bigger than my body, bigger and free, this amazing feeling of freedom. If you put me in a bigger room, I would have been bigger than that room. It was just the most glorious feeling. And then I had this knowing that there was an overarching theme in Mrs. Wilma's life where separation was the main part of one of her big lessons or experiences she wanted to have. So in her childhood, there was a whole lot of segregation. She lived through that. And then now in death, she's dying without her family, so separated again. And so this was a big part of her learning experience. So as we're standing in this forest, she tells me we're going to climb this tree, young Mrs. Wilma does. And just by thinking about it, we're at the top of the tree. And I can see full 360, even though I'm just staring straight ahead. And she tells me that this tree is a life. But if we look more closely, every single root on this tree is a life. Every single root that branches off of another root is its own little life. Every branch is its own life. Every branch branching off that branch is its own life. Every single leaf is its own life. And yet it's all connected, and it's all in service to the greater whole of this tree. And then if we pull back even further, this tree is not just one life, it's part of this whole forest. And if we pull back even further, this forest is part of an entire ecosystem. And it was as though she had this final moment and a student to teach that we aren't separate, that that's an illusion, and that we are all connected, even though we perceive ourselves to have all individual lives. And so in this last final moments of her life, she took the opportunity to teach from her experience of separation and segregation, to teach this moment of unity and connection of all things. So that was one of my favorite experiences. And as she took her final breath, I'm holding her hand with my left hand in the hospital, and Mrs. Wilma's holding my right hand. And it was just this glorious moment of just unity. And it was so beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, it's not the average person that might pick up on that. So I want to get into some of your beliefs about the afterlife. I know you've been trained as a medium, intuitive, hypnosis, Reiki, past life regressions, theology. There's a lot to you. So to everyone who's listening right now, you just didn't walk in and, ooh, all these things happened. You're open to it. Do you want to talk a little bit about your history and how you first started believing in a bigger picture, believing in the afterlife, believing in the soul?
When I was very little, I would hear a voice, and the voice was, I could be 4 or 5. We're talking very, very young. And the voice was very helpful, and it was always guiding me. And it always felt like I just assumed everyone heard this voice or had this voice. The voice was sometimes masculine, sometimes feminine, but it always came from the same place somehow. When I would get overwhelmed as a little girl, I would go sit in an empty bathtub, close the bathroom door, and I would just focus on the silence. And sometimes the voice would find me in those moments of silence and sometimes not. My family was not religious. My grandmother was a Seventh-day Adventist, but she was not practicing. But my mother, my father, nobody practiced anything, and they weren't spiritual either. So what I know I was doing now was a form of meditation, but my family would not have known what that was even then. That it was just something I was doing. When I would see spirit and I would share that with my family, it was dismissed. My dad used to say, I believe you believe that's what you saw, and so it never, the experiences with spirit were so beautiful and so comforting and so transformative. I never questioned if they were real, but it did make me question the wisdom of my parents, if I could trust their teachings, because it didn't make me think, oh, I must have imagined that because I knew it was real. I thought, oh, are they not experiencing that? And then I started being more mindful over who I shared those experiences with. Um, I would say once I sort of went to college and graduated, went to grad school, got married, had kids, I really put this on the back burner. I really focused on all the amazing things that this physical life had to offer. And I was going full force. I did not, want to take time for any kind of spiritual stuff. And, really, but my team and spirit started coming around and started wanting me to focus on compassion. I think one of the things when we're really young, children, teenager, and even into our early adulthood, we're so self-focused because we have to for survival. We have to learn what our family wants so that we can be accepted. And then we change who we are so we can fit into that family. And then we do that with our friends through middle school and high school. And then in college, you're starting out and you're like, who am I as a young adult? So you're still so self-focused. And my team and spirit decided it was time for me to move from that self-focused attitude and move into a more compassionate way of viewing the world. And they would always remind me, put yourself in their shoes, not how you would do something different, not to try to fix their circumstance, but just put yourself in their shoes. And that's it. Trying to help me understand what someone else was going through. And so with the help of who I call A team, my team and spirit, I started allowing their teachings to change my perspectives around life. But I've always had a spiritual connection. I even studied in college art history and theology. I was looking for the answers. Like if my parents didn't have them, who would? It had to be out there. And the more research I did, the more questions I had over and over. And I think that the most important thing that we can all do, where we can all start, is by turning inward and trusting our own connection to our own higher self or spirit or God or universe, energy, whatever word works for you. It's all the same, really. So if we're tuning into that, we can start to navigate our own challenges with a little more grace and peace by connecting to what we can trust.
Absolutely. When did Reiki and mediumship come into the picture? Because you've done a lot of stuff, good stuff.
So it all happened really so fast. I thought I was signing up for I thought I was signing up for I had this idea after I became a death doula that I would help out with green funerals and green burials and things like that. And I thought I was going to something like that, like a conference. And I actually found myself at a conference and now I can't remember what it was called, but it was being put on. It was a bunch of mediums. They were there. And I think it was in Arizona or New Mexico. And all these mediums were there. And I'm like, where am I? I thought I was at this funeral thing. And then I started thinking, well, mediumship. And then I hear people doing Reiki. That's when I first heard about your show. And right after that, I was taking that mediumship workshop in Louisiana where we first met. And it just unfolded all so quickly. And I just was so thirsty for as much knowledge as I could get. I started taking courses and everything because I wanted to know more. That's how it all sort of unfolded. So I got certified in everything as quickly as I could.
Yeah. So you are a medium and people work with you as an intuitive, you believe you call it. And you do so much these days. And I'm ever so proud to have that first conversation in Louisiana to where you are today. Tell us, I know you just put the book out, which is fantastic. Congratulations. It
Thank you.
is a labor of love.
It
But
was.
tell us about it. What can we find? What is it about? And maybe some stories from your book.
Sure. So a few years ago, I was laying in bed and I heard a voice outside. So normally I hear the voice of my team and spirit inside my head. This one came right in front of my face from outside my head, and it said, "You're going to write a book." And I was like, "Write a book? I, what, are you sure?" Like, I don't feel qualified. I don't feel, I mean, worthy is not the right word, but surely I didn't have anything worth saying that someone would want to read. That was sort of my idea. And they said it will take 2.5 years to complete and write what you know. Or 2 years to complete. It took me 2.5 years. Um, well, I didn't know what to write about. Had no idea. What do I know? I know a little about a lot of things, but I didn't feel like an expert in any one field. And then it did occur to me that my favorite thing that was happening were the transformative bedside experiences of my patients. And I'd already journaled, I had years of journals of I write down all the experiences I'm having. And so I referred to those journals and kind of compiled them, my favorite ones, into this book. I also wrote, so every chapter, every other chapter is one of my patient stories. And of course, I changed the names to protect the family and their privacy. And the preceding chapter is something that I've learned from spirit and something that I've learned through the process of working with spirit and people who are dying. And then I would put a relatable story of one of my patients as they transitioned. So it's really a teaching book and then beautiful stories. I end every chapter with a channeled message from my team in spirit, A team. They have such beautiful, relevant things to say. So it's this kind of compilation of all the beautiful things happening. And I just really wanted to share these stories. I can share one story that's a little out there, but it is one that happened fairly recently. It is one that I'm hoping will happen more times for me. I hope I don't sound too. All right, let's just see if we can follow. So I get a call. I was out late. I was out late, later than I normally am. And I see on my email that there's a request for a NOTA visit. I had a feeling that I should be there for this person, but it was already so late. It was after midnight. I was so tired. I just wanted to go to bed. But I looked on the schedule to see what time slots were available, and all the good ones had already been taken. Like nobody wants the midnight to 3 a.m. shift, for example. So I did see there was a 6 a.m. shift, and that was just a few hours away. But I thought, okay, if I'm supposed to be there, guys, I'm talking to my team in spirit. If I'm supposed to be there, you guys are going to have to wake me up. I'm not setting an alarm. And it's going to have to be like at 4:30 for me to get ready in time and get down there. At 4:28, I wake up and I have the song playing in my head. It's called Colors by the Black Pumas. And it's talking, the song lyrics are talking about the meadows of green and the trees and the blue skies. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be relevant somehow. And I look at the clock. I'm like, all right, guys, I'm signing up. I hop in the car, start driving to the hospital, and I turn on the radio. Colors by the Black Pumas is playing again. And I'm just like, oh, this is going to be a thing. Okay. And I have a sudden realization that my patient will be male. He will be having issues around anxiety, and he would be Black. Well, at that time, I was having panic attacks. I don't know why. They came out of nowhere. They're really, really scary if you haven't had them. And I was a little worried about that anxiety because sometimes I feel like if I watch it, it might trigger one. So I was like, okay, let's just see what's going to happen. I get there and Mr. Virgil, he is male, he is Black, and he is having panic attacks over and over. 90 seconds of peace followed by like 30 seconds of panic. So it was hard to watch if you are unaware of what's the spiritual aspect happening bedside and you're just focused on the physical. So I sit down with him. I put my hands on him, trying to bring him peace. And when I realized that wasn't working, I decided to connect to him more on a spiritual level. And as I did, once again, the hospital room transformed into the most beautiful scene that you can imagine. It was a green meadow. There were all these big, bright flowers. They were bigger and brighter than any flower that I've ever seen on earth. And there was a forest off to the like straight ahead and off to the right a little bit. And everything emanated light from within. Every blade of grass, every flower, every tree. It's like light came out of it. And everything had a sound. It was as though it had a humming or a tone of some sort. I really can't explain it, but it was musical. It didn't have a beat, but there was this music. somehow out of every single thing. And it was just glorious. And I recognized that I'm standing in this field right next to Mr. Virgil. So again, I have this awareness that I am sitting bedside Mr. Virgil in the hospital, holding his hand. And also, Mr. Virgil and I are standing together in this magnificent field of light and color and sound. And I know that we have to walk through the forest as part of our journey. I can hear a party happening over there. And this is very, very common. There's always a welcome home party that's happening for our loved ones. And these can vary from, small picnics in a park to something grand in some kind of ballroom. And it's always fun to see which kind of party my patient's going to be having, because it gives me a lot of insight to who they are or what they like that maybe I didn't realize in their physical life. So we start walking towards the forest, and all of a sudden I feel Mr. Virgil have just a real rush of apprehension. Fear comes through him, and he didn't want to enter the forest. It's like he knew once he entered and went into that welcome home party, which I can see his mom at. I don't know, it seemed final for him. So just then a being of light comes out of the forest, and she is blue and white light. And she is absolutely gorgeous, and just peace rushes over you when you see her. And it was me. I was the being of light. I don't know how now I am in 3 places at once. This is the only time this has ever happened, but we are multidimensional beings after all, and so I'm thinking that this is how this all relates. I am physically in the room with Mr. Virgil as his body is shutting down. I am observing all of this happening from the field of flowers with Mr. Virgil. And I'm also the me of light coming from the forest to aid him through his journey through the forest. So it was and continues to be the most astounding experience so far. As he's having all this apprehension, I bring a gift out of, I don't know, nowhere. I present him with a small gift, and it's a little box wrapped in a purple ribbon. And I explain to him that this is his gift of life, and that inside this little box is every experience he has ever had as Mr. Virgil. And he's like, well, I don't think I can go in there to the forest because I have sinned, and I have so many things that I'm regretful of and things I shouldn't have done. I, the me of light, had this unconditional love for him, and unconditional love I have never felt before. I love unconditionally, but this was different. It didn't matter what he did. It didn't matter who he was. It didn't matter any of that. I loved him so much. And it just was all in this box, like it was just experience, and that was it. There was no judgment at all. And I made him feel, I projected somehow that he was safe and that he was loved, and nothing like that mattered. And he agreed to enter the forest. And so he goes with the me of light. Me, the other me, stays in the field of flowers. And yet I'm watching somehow, observing them as they walk through the forest. And I'm also present as the me of light, very much aware of walking with him through the forest. Suddenly, again, he has this wave of fear come over him. And I get really, really big, the me of light does. And I scoop him up like he's a baby. And I hold him and I rock him and I kiss the top of his head. And the entire forest, I don't know, fades away, and it becomes a backdrop of stars. And it's like we're in space somehow. And I'm holding him until he felt ready again to go on the trip. And then I put him back down. We're back in the forest and we continue our journey. As we get to the edge of the forest, we can see the party, and he decides he's not ready to go in yet and wants to sit down. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. He asks the me of light, what's going to happen to my nephew and my uncle? And the me of light projects to him potential possibilities and outcomes for both of these people. But when that happens, my awareness wouldn't let me see what was being projected as the me of light. It shot back to the observer in the field. So I wasn't allowed to see the potential outcomes of these other 2 people. When that was over, he sat on the log and he decided he needed a minute to take time before he went into the welcome party where his mom was waiting and other people. Just then a nurse comes in to take his vitals. And I all of a sudden shoot back to my physical self. And she's chatting about the bachelorette party she's about to go to for the weekend and getting his vitals. And I, I just thought it was so funny that she's interrupting a homecoming party, talking about the bachelorette party. And it was just so interesting and how everything was just all connected. She has no idea that she's left him about to transition right there on the edge of the forest. Um, or that I was in three worlds at once, all at one time. It was time for me to leave on that shift. And I really wanted to stay, but the next volunteer had shown up. And so I allowed them to stay. And as I was leaving, that's when Mr. Virgil finally walked into the welcome home party. But it was one of the most profound experiences I've ever had. I'm looking forward to having more of those. It was one of the most recent ones that I've experienced, and I cannot wait to try to figure out what it's like to be in three worlds at once again.
Incredible. So you're saying that's when he passed, just shortly
Yes,
after?
yes.
Probably at peace. Wow. So you experience these, and if I was a skeptic, I would say those all sound great that you experience them, but have you received any verified information? Obviously not with the uncle and the with
Sure.
uncle and nephew, but something that would have, you know what I'm getting at? Just something that
To
some
prove.
maybe some words that came out of somebody's mouth. I don't not believe you because I do. I think we are multi-dimensional beings. I've heard just some incredible stories, and when we slow down, when we study psychic and mediumship and explore what's possible. I mean, I've had some outrageous experiences. So I think your real gift, I don't think it, I know it, your real gift to people as a death doula. But if there was somebody skeptical saying, well, these are your experiences, how do we know?
So, for a lot of people, unless they're having a near death experience where they can come back and verify, if they're all the way transitioning, then it's very difficult to prove. But I can say that these people or people have similar experiences, even with people who are with not who are dying, but who have Alzheimer's, dementia, or a condition at birth that kept them from being nonverbal. So even if they're not transitioning yet, they step out of their bodies very, very frequently. And I have been able to work with families through some of these situations. And when I explain something like, hey, they're telling me this, or hey, they're telling me that through Alzheimer's or dementia, or even one case, which I haven't written about. So let me really quickly come up with a name in my head. We'll call him Eric. Eric is a male in his 20s. He's quadriplegic. And at 2 years old, he developed a condition that made him nonverbal. And he, his parents, his mother hired me um, because they were told that he was probably going to be transitioning soon. So I was coming in to sort of be a death doula for the family and for him. And I would like to say he's still going. He's still here as of now. But because he's nonverbal, there's been some situations with the family where the family has different ideas of how they want to proceed with him. And so he was able to very clearly tell me certain things that were uncomfortable in his body, uncomfortable that were causing pain. And I relayed this information to the family because he's standing outside his body. He's right there. And I tell this to the family and they're like, no, no, that doesn't make sense. No, that doesn't make sense. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Well, she calls me a few days later. She goes, well, we went ahead and took him into the doctor just in case. And you're right. He had this going on with his body on that side. He had this going on with that body. And I'm just like, yeah, because he's saying it. He's standing outside his body. He's right there. So without giving away his health, I haven't thought how to word some of this because of the privacy of the family and the fact that they're still around, especially. But the fact that they had no idea this was going on within their son's body or their brother's body. And then it was validated a few days later when they decided just to go check it out at the hospital was very validating to the fact that he was communicating very clearly and very effectively. He had some other things that he wanted to negotiate with the families on how relationships were unfolding with them and how his purpose has been in one way or another to unify the family. And he feels like it's difficult for him to move on with everyone fighting over how he should be moving on. So a lot of that got resolved with this session, a few days after, actually, after they had it validated. And so that was very helpful in healing. So even people who aren't dying, who later can have the evidence validated, is really, really helpful. When I'm helping someone transition and I'm helping the family, the evidence that comes through is, I would say, usually around song choices or something like that, which the family could say, well, yeah, they like the song, or yeah, they played the trumpet. And those are small things. But when they're dying, I'm really focused on how to make that transition more peaceful and embracing all of the spiritual and physical experiences that go along with that. So for me, it's very, very real. And I have dealt with many families who don't maybe believe in this type of situation. And so it's not my job to convert them. Why would I ever want to? No. But it is my job to bring peace. And so we can navigate or maybe shift how we word things so that it brings peace to the family as well.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's so difficult. There could be so much family baggage, and to be able to tap into and talk to that person, even if they're nonverbal, we
Hmm.
get it. You and I both have done our share of psychic and medium work. And the stuff that we think is our imagination, when it gets confirmed and it's not, you just think, oh my gosh, how can this be? And so to be that and be that for the dying person, whether or not someone believes, and it isn't your job to try to convince someone. Can you talk about the welcoming committee, people being there to bring someone home? Because I know for me, I have visions of my dad and my grandmother being right there, when my time comes, and whoever else might be at the time. But talk a little bit about that process as a dying person, what might tend to happen, whether we believe or not believe.
Sure. So, in every case that I've experienced so far, and I understand that can change, you guys, but every experience so far, there has been a welcome party of sorts. And it sounds, there's music, there's decorations, there's loved ones, even people maybe that we loved that we didn't have in this physical life. We know them from another time and space. So there's all sorts of people, beings congregating to welcome you home. There is usually, you're the guest of honor. People are, the amount of excitement that I feel is more excitement than I have felt at any surprise party or at any gathering. It is overwhelming. It's so joyous. My grandmother, one of my grandmothers, whenever she transitioned, she was giving her team in spirit, or she was talking to her loved ones who went before her. She was telling them exactly what she wanted. She was always in control. She planned events and parties for our family. So she was very much into event planning. And so she was telling them exactly what she wanted before she died. She's like, all right, guys, when I get over there, I'm going to want to be on a golf course. When I go over there, so she wanted it to be at the country club. She wanted it to be, casual. She wanted everybody there. She was talking about every way she can plan it. So she was planning her own homecoming party. My other grandmother was completely different. She had a little bit of fear around dying, and her welcome home party was something I haven't seen yet again. But my grandfather was sitting outside of a delivery room in a hospital, and she was going to be delivered into the other world. And back then, men weren't allowed in the delivery room. So he was waiting outside the door. So that's how it was. He was waiting for her to be delivered into this world. And down the hallway, just a couple of doors down, was this all white, bright room that was so bright, it was just light. And all of these people, I saw him open the door and tell everybody it's time. And when he did that, I could see some of her children. I could see some of her siblings. I saw people that I didn't even recognize. And they were all just anticipating just the best time with her. And it was as though it was in a delivery room. So, what an unusual party. But it was something that sort of suited that grandmother. It was like being rebirthed into something. And so that worked for her. Whereas my other grandmother, throwing parties for her all her life and very controlling. She was telling people what she wanted when she transitioned, and she got it. She was there. She was wearing a visor, just like she would play on the golf course. Fantastic. So these welcome parties are, it's a way to have someone feel loved. It's a way to have someone feel that they're not alone and that this world is not so different than where we're coming from, but it's filled with so much more, I don't know, just beauty and grace and understanding and freedom is what it feels like, expansiveness. So those are the welcome home parties.
Thank you. We as human beings will never get our heads around how glorious the next stage is. Our returning home, I'll put it that way. I think we're here just for a short time and we go back. And like we welcome a baby to this world, I mean, it's a grand celebration. And then a death, although many cultures do celebrate death, our Central and South American countries and others. Here, I know we don't so much. It's fear and I don't want to go and that whole thing. And to have loved ones show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard many, many stories of people who've verbalized who they see and how they see them. And so often they might not even know somebody's deceased. And there they are. And that feeling of just like, I'm going home, so I get it, that rebirth, that big celebration that, oh, we're back together again. And I remember my grandmother before she passed, she's 1 week short of her 91st birthday. And everybody in her life had died, all of her
Mm-hmm.
friends and husband and uh, almost all brothers and sisters. And so she wasn't afraid. And she says, when God calls me forth, I can't come fifth. That was her line. She was great. But just getting that reunion that I've lived a good life and now I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to see everybody again. And I have full 100% confidence that that's how it goes. And they're there. And then we get to like go, oh my gosh, that life will make this life here seem like just a dream.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And when I'm in the other space in between, walking with people to their parties, for example, it feels so much more real than when I come back to this reality. This reality feels confined or restricted somehow than when I'm there. And I know that I'm not even experiencing all of it, just a little snippet, but it's so much bigger and brighter and the light and the sound, everything, it's just somehow more amazing and more intense than it is here. Here, I feel not trapped. That's not a good word. I want to be here, but limited a little bit. And we aren't limited. We are limitless, and we are perceived limited and are, I think, by our brains that kind of shut out some of our otherworldly experiences that are happening right here with us right now.
What am I thinking? If you're having these experiences, tells me other people can have these experiences.
Yeah.
We want them, right? I
Yes.
don't think there's anybody that wouldn't want. I've heard them called spiritually transformative experiences and different than a near-death experience, but they change people for life. But I don't hear and tell you that they're commonplace, that you're with somebody as they pass and you have these experiences. How can we begin? Now, I know not everybody wants to be a death doula, or maybe this will open the door for some volunteers with NODA, No One Dies Alone. Wouldn't that be great coming out of
So
this
great.
episode? But how do we start? Is it meditation? Is it being present? Is it a prayer? What advice would you give?
All of that. So meditation often comes with a little bit of apprehension for some people who just absolutely say, I cannot meditate. And so I sometimes say, well, then don't call it meditation, right? Call it sitting in silence, or closing your eyes is really helpful to remove some of those distractions in your physical reality. But I would say start now. Start now. Don't wait until someone's dying. But if you are already in a position where someone has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, again, start now and take time every day and just sit for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be some overthought process. Just sit quietly for a few minutes, say a prayer, set an intention, whatever feels right for you. Talk to God, universe, angels, whatever again feels right for you. And you just say, hey guys, I would like to have a shared death experience. Now I'm going to sit quietly. And if you can help me practice receiving information so that when the time comes, I can have one, and then write it down. I cannot just stress that enough. Write it down because you will forget. And if you go back and you were to do this even for 10 days straight, and you go back and look at day one, and then you look at day 10, you're going to be like, I think I'm discerning these messages a little more now than I was when I first started, even just in a short time like that. Because at first you start to think, am I making this up? Everything feels made up. And you know what I say to that? I say, make it up, because this world is co-created and we are all co-creating it together. And your imagination is part of creation. It's part of how we create things. So if you're feeling like you just want to explore what your imagination can do visually, that's an excellent way to open the door to spirit leading you to impressions. Absolutely. Feel like you're making it up. Go for it. And this is a good way to start. And then when you allow yourself to move past that a little bit, you'll start to have discernment over what is actually coming in as an impression from spirit and what you're creating. A good way to tell is if you're creating it, you take time in your head to kind of think about what you want to create. I want to see a blue sky. I want to see a waterfall. Now, if it's being given to you, all of a sudden you just see blue sky, waterfall, green meadow. It all comes in super fast like a download. Bam. And the more you practice, the more you start to recognize what's made up and what's not. And even someone who's been doing this a long time, I've been doing it for several years now. And just like when Eric's family told me, no, that's not right, I left feeling a little defeated. Like, how did I mess this up? I really missed the mark here. I felt like I had failed the family. And so I was really grateful when they called back a few days later to validate um, those things coming through. So even people who are doing it all the time feel like, am I making this up? Did I interpret that message correctly? That's part of it. That's okay. That's okay. Allow yourself to experience. And as you practice that, when the opportunity comes for a shared death experience, you're already open to spirit. You've already learned what it feels like to allow the outside distractions to fall away, and you can be open to what comes through. So I would say practice, solitude, and writing it down.
Good words. I was on an interview earlier this morning. Somebody was interviewing me, and I talked about my first medium experience. And I was 100% accurate with names, places, everything.
Wow.
My very first experience, though, I was told that I wasn't doing a medium reading. I was pretending just
Hmm.
to get the hang of it. So the words were invent that there's someone standing behind your partner, invent what they look like, invent what details about their life, and invent that there's a message that they want to share. And in it, I just invented a man standing behind my partner who was a grandfather on her mom's side. His name was Jan. He was a fisherman in Denmark, died of lung cancer, had a big gap between his front teeth, never told her mom, his daughter, that he loved her and wanted her to pass on that information. And I opened my eyes, having invented that, and she was crying. Her grandfather's name was Jan, fisherman in Denmark, gap
Wow.
between his teeth, died of lung cancer, and that was indeed that. She found out that she always knew that her mom was never told, I love you. He didn't hug and all that. So that imagination is the most powerful force. Even Einstein has some great quote, which I don't remember, about how imagination is the most important tool we have. So
Yeah.
anyone listening right now, get rid of the words, oh, it's just my
Hmm.
imagination. Because
Yep.
your imagination can be magic.
It can be. Let that go.
Yeah. Do you have any tools in your new book about helping people? It's not just filled with stories, right?
Right.
How can, what's in there that can impact somebody who's reading it, their life right now, whether they're dying or not?
So one of my favorite things that I like to tell people is what it feels like, at least for me, oftentimes to connect with spirit. So if I were to have you close your eyes right now and imagine the beach and feel the sand beneath your toes and the water, hear it crash up on the shore, maybe hear the cry of a seagull and feel the breeze, coming over your skin or through your hair. But at the same time, you're also aware that you're sitting right where you are. And so that's what it feels like to be in two worlds at once. Sometimes it could feel so subtle like that. I am at the beach and yet I'm in this chair. And that is easy for us to dismiss sometimes. It can feel like a memory or a thought or something that's right on the tip of our tongue, but we're not quite there. That's what sometimes connecting to spirit feels like. So, whenever we do it enough, though, and we become familiar, those images of the beach become more vibrant and they become more real than us sitting in our chair. That takes practice. But when it first is happening, it feels like a memory or just a thought that you're creating. And so, but thoughts have power. So I would say that to not dismiss the experiences and to recognize wherever you want to be, imagine that you're there. And that is the start of being in two worlds at once. And it can feel really subtle like that, and to not dismiss it. That's one of my biggest, I think, beginner teaching things.
And that's in the book. Let me just remind people of the title of your book, Healing Whispers from Spirit Guides, Bringing the Gap Between Life and the Afterlife with a Death Doula's Wisdom. Can we talk about our teams? Do we all have a team? Do we all have a spirit team? Are there people helping me on my mission right now? What say you?
Yes, of course. We all have a team. I call my team A team. I first I called them A team. That was the name that came to me. And then my husband reminded me of a crime fighting um, group from the 80s, I think, with Mr. T. They were called the A Team. And it's a little bit before my time, but not too much. I remember Mr. T. He used to, I pity the fool, So then I thought, oh my gosh, I have chosen a lame name. Like, I don't want this to be my team's name. And so I said, all right, guys, I want to change your name. I want it to be something that's, means oneness or unity. And I want it to be, something singular. And I want it to more represent a collective. And so I was like, balls in your court, here we go. And I left right after that to take my cat to the vet. And the as I'm pulling into the vet, all the parking places are being blocked by a delivery of a temporary dumpster. And it's a green dumpster, and in big white letters, it said A Team on the side of the dumpster. And I was like, okay, you guys, I guess we're sticking with A Team. And it was in that moment that I realized that A is singular and it does mean one in the English language, and that it implies we are a team. We're a team together and they need me as much as I need them. And so A Team stuck. So I'm not trying to rip it off of the crime fighting heroes from the 80s, but that's my team in spirit. And my team in spirit tells me that we all have a team in spirit. We all have helpers and guides, and they may not all just be ancestors. A lot of people think that, their team in spirit is people that they've lost, their grandmother, their dad, things like that. And it can be. It can be your ancestors, but in my experience, when I tune into other people's teams in spirit, there's alternate beings. There's like alien looking people sometimes. There's angelics, or what I perceive to be angelics. There's, masters, or what we perceive to have masters on our team. I think that spirit takes forms based on what we need so that we can more easily connect. Because for me, knowing a name for my team in spirit, being able to call certain voices that I hear a specific name really helps my human self to be able to call upon a certain spirit to connect to. I don't know why I need that. I feel like I do. I haven't moved beyond that yet. But so A Team has several members, and I will talk to them individually. And when I meet other people who have their teams, I have found that they feel it's easier to connect once they assign them a name or a physical appearance in their mind. So yes, we all have a team in spirit. And if you're wanting to connect to yours, there are so many amazing meditations out there that allow you to practice connecting to your team in spirit. And don't be dismissive. If you barely imagine that beach, but it's a person, go for it. And just say, all right, that's one of my guides. And I don't know, that's been really helpful for me.
Great. Thank you. When you talked about the beach, yes, I had my eyes closed. I was there. I could feel the sand between my toes. But it reminded me of some loved ones I have that are in the spirit world. I could be, say, editing a podcast or paying the bills or something. And suddenly, whoosh, I get this memory and the
Yes.
feeling of things that we've done together. Don't discount those, anyone.
Right.
Those are little calling cards from our loved ones, I think working the same way, right?
That's so well said. Little calling cards from our loved ones. I love that. And they are working the same way. And that's how you receive information. So are you very visual? Are you a visual
I
person?
am, yes.
Yeah, that's how they're
Yeah.
working with you.
I love it. And I love the feelings. And then I think I'll say, oh, well, then remember this. And then all of a sudden be remember this. And for me, it's a beautiful thing, especially when I least expect it. I have a former boyfriend who is now in the spirit world. And I remember boarding an airplane, feeling a little bit sad, I can tell you. And out of the blue, he was very funny, came a one-liner that clearly came from him, did not come from my imagination. And it was one of those laughs where you buckle over and you laugh until you cry. And, people must have thought I was nuts. But to me, that was a loud and clear calling card because I could not have created that and I couldn't have created it so fast. Anyways, it was lovely. If we slow down, this is something I'm really getting from our conversation today. Slow down, be in the present moment. There's a world that can unfold through our imagination, which is everything if we let it.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely. And it's beautiful.
it is. Let's talk about your website and what we can find. Your website is helengretchenjones.com. What can we find there?
You will find a little bit about my services that I offer, a little of which are I have intuitive services and death doula services, of course. The intuitive services that I offer are just kind of go with the flow. Sometimes loved ones come in, sometimes it's asking questions and kind of seeing what comes through. But it's so important that I stress this with every session that I have, that if someone tells you something is going to happen in your future and this is an absolute, well, that doesn't sit right with me. Spirit, my team in spirit always tells me that, because I'll often see threads of light around people, like just coming off their heads and shoulders. And they light up when someone says, should I take the job in New York or should I not? The job in New York may light up brighter as the strongest probability of many possibilities. If you don't like that, change it. The power is in the now. No one can ever take your power from you. You have free will, you have choice. Your higher soul may have some experiences that really want to have and experience, but it doesn't take away the journey of getting to that experience. You get to choose it every single time. So if someone says this is definitely going to happen, I don't know. I would say just maybe dismiss that and recognize your own power and your own choices and how you get to shape your own life. So I do see possibilities and probabilities. And I believe, at least this is my thoughts so far, that the probabilities light up the most because the person has put the highest amount of focus and energy in creating that potential, not because the world is saying it's the one you should take. So I'm figuring that out still as I move along, right? So A team doesn't want me to say anything is set in stone, but I believe we're dealing with energy and co-creation of energy. I have people in my book called Science Club, and they're always coming in talking about physics in relation to spirituality. And I think this is part of what they're saying. So it's sort of like you get to choose, thoughts create worlds. And so if you're putting a lot of focus in that job in New York, it's lighting up the brightest because that's where you're putting your energy. That's where you're putting all this potential, not because it's where you're supposed to be, hands down. It's just another path on your journey. And if it's lighting up bright and you like it, keep doing what you're doing. That's the path that you are creating. So that's how intuitive readings work. You'll
Thank
also
you.
find, I was going to say, you'll also find a little bio about me and information on the book as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, our time is just about up for today. What closing words do you want to share with our listener today? Maybe a little gemstone they can use in their life right now, today, or whatever you want to share.
Oh, there's so much. I suppose I would say that the power of your entire life is right now. Everything is in this present moment, everything. Every choice that you've ever made leading up to this moment, you can let that go. Everything that about your future, you can let that go. What do you want to do right now? How do you want to live right now? If there are things that you haven't said to your loved ones, if there are avenues to open up conversation with loved ones, it's time to take steps to do that. We are not guaranteed tomorrow. Death comes for the healthy and the sick, the old and the young, and none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. So if you can go to bed tonight thinking it would be okay, then you're living your life just right where you should be.
Well said. Well, my friend, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fantastic.
Has been absolutely fantastic. Okay, as a reminder, you can go to helengretchenjones.com. Also, look up No One Dies Alone, a wonderful organization. And if you have that instinct to volunteer, what a beautiful thing. Also, volunteering with hospice, you can check out them in your local area. I have heard wonderful stories from listeners who have volunteered and what a difference it makes, not only volunteering and helping others, but the gift that they get right back. And your book is called Healing Whispers from Spirit Guides, Bridging the Gap Between Life and the Afterlife with a Death Doula's Wisdom. So many great things.
Thank
And as
you.
a reminder, I'm so proud of you. I really am. A
Thank you.
reminder that my website is wedon'tdie.com. There you can find access to all my video interviews, audio interviews between this show and Shades of the Afterlife. I have now over 650 episodes for you, talking about everything one could imagine about the afterlife, really letting you know that loved ones are around. You're going to see them again. No one dies alone. Your life is for a reason. You are a very powerful divine soul right now. Use your imagination. It really is a connection to so much more. So go to wedon'tdie.com. Please come visit me at our free Sunday gathering, I should say. Beautiful. Your loved one may even come through in the medium demonstration. Each Sunday gathering is designed to empower you with your life, and they're a whole lot of fun. They are very inspirational and fun. And if you'd like a free copy of my book, at the bottom of the page, near the bottom at wedon'tdie.com, it says enter your name and your email address, and you'll get the first few chapters. The secret is it's the entire book. Chapter 10 is how to survive grief. I know many people come to these episodes as your heart aches because someone you love has passed. And so I want to give you those tools to assist you through the grieving process and make you feel better, plus good evidence about life after death and how to live life powerfully. So in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain. I'm always so happy to be your host on We Don't Die. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is so important. So live in the present moment, engage that imagination, trust, and you never know what can unfold. So thank you for listening or for watching, and we'll see you again soon.